Claremont's rich industrial heritage is evidenced by the presence of two significant groups of mill buildings extending along both sides of the Sugar River through the center of the city's urban core. Together, the buildings of the Monadnock Mills Company and the Sullivan Machinery Company present more than a half-mile-long complex of trial structures surrounded by directly and indirectly related commercial, residential, and institutional buildings. Both complexes exerted a strong influence over the community's economy, identity, and direction during their peak years. For almost 90 years, the Monadnock Mills produced some of the nation's finest jacquard quilts, cotton, linen fabrics, and was a major employer for the community. Sullivan Joy produced mining and quarry machinery, which revolutionized the coal mining industry and was the community's largest employer for more than half a century. The Monadnock Mill activity began when a group of local investors became alarmed by an apparent movement of commercial activity out of the village center to the lower village in the 1830s. Banding together, they constructed a mill and boarding house on the Sugar River in the center of the town. In 1842, a group of Boston investors, Parker, Wilder, and Parker, bought the buildings, incorporated as the Monadnock Mill Company, and began a textile producing operation that continued until 1932. Over this period, the company built 14 additional buildings in close proximity for various textile producing processes, power generation, housing, and management. The complex is unusually well preserved. Only 3 buildings have been lost from the immediate complex. One of a pair of identical overseers' houses, a portion of the cloth room adjacent to Mill Number 1, and a wooden tenement house for workers. In the early years of operation, the mills processed raw cotton, spun wool, and produced plain cotton goods, sheeting, and piquette cottons. After the installation of jacquard looms in 1870, the mills produced the nation's first Marseille quilts and went on to the more complicated production of satin-finished quilts in damask, embroidered and point-lace designs, and fine linen fabrics. In August 1932, the company's business, stock, and machinery were sold to the Bates Manufacturing Company of Lewiston, Maine, and in December of that year, the Monadnock Mills closed. At its peak, Monadnock employed more than 600 workers. By 1932, the workforce had declined to 125. By this time, however, the Sullivan Machinery Company had been the city's largest employer for almost a decade. The company began in 1868, a collaboration between James P. Upham, a wealthy industrialist, and an inventive mechanical engineer, Albert Ball. The company was formed to produce a diamond channeling machine for mining and quarry developed by Ball and Roger Love. By 1870, the firm employed 50 men and also produced shafting, mill filings, casting, water wheels, and water wheel regulators. Ball continued to develop ideas, and Sullivan began specializing more and more in Ball's mining equipment, and by the late 1880s, the company was financially secure. Beginning in 1888, Sullivan began an ambitious building campaign, consolidating a widespread complex of buildings into a large U-shaped 4-story brick machine shop on Main Street, extending back to the Sugar River. An adjacent 3-story brick office building followed to the west, and 2 double tenement buildings were built on North Street. Ball's ideas continued to flow: a shifting drilling machine, a steam-driven stationary air compressor, a reciprocating pneumatic rock drill, and Sullivan continued to expand, merging with the Diamond Prospect Company in 1892. The company's headquarters moved to Chicago and later to Michigan City, Indiana, but the works remained in Claremont. By the 1920s, however, the company had reached the limit of its physical expansion in Claremont. Its machinery buildings ran 2/10 of a mile down Main Street back to the Sugar River, across the river, the power plant and foundry, and across Main Street, the forge. The operations involved underground tunnels and bridges between buildings, trolley lines running into the buildings, office additions on top of buildings, and manufacturing processes in the basement of buildings. Sullivan had become New Hampshire's largest machine company with 1,200 workers, Claremont's largest employer. Because of the company's physical inability to expand locally, in 1922 Sullivan moved some of its operations to Michigan City and concentrated Claremont production on air compressors, coal cutters, hammer drills, and hoists. In 1946, Sullivan merged with three other manufacturers, including Joy Machinery Company, to become Joy Manufacturing Company. Joy continued to manufacture mining and drilling machinery in Claremont, but moved its operations to a new building on the River Road in the 1960s. By 1983, technological advancements in the foreign manufacturing operations had cut so severely into Joy's sales that the local workforce was cut from about 800 to a mere 100. The manufacturing operation was finally sold in early 1984 to a former machinist who has resumed operation under the name Sullivan Machinery. The walking tour begins in front of the Moody Building, also known as Hotel Claremont. Hotel Claremont, 1890 to 1892. This handsome colonial revival structure was built by a group of local entrepreneurs at a time of flourishing industrial development for Claremont to replace the Tremont House, which had stood in the center of Tremont Square from 1823 until 1879, when it burned. Hotel Claremont was later purchased by William H. Moody, who renamed it the Hotel Moody. It now houses offices. Office Monadnock Mills Company, 1881. The management and textile design offices were located in this one-story brick building, constructed with stone and granite foundation, jerkin head gables, black string coarse bricks, and an ornamental porch. The interior offices are fireplaced and have oak wainscoting. Cotton Warehouse, No. 1, Mill No. 5, Monadnock Mills Company, 1880. Originally used for storing bales of raw cotton, this building became known as Mill No. 5 in 1911, when a third story was added and large windows installed for 64 looms acquired through Monadnock's purchase of the Union Manufacturing Company in Peterborough. The building was timber columns and beams, brick pilasters and cornices, replacement steel lintels, and cast steel sills. Central Street, Ford Shop, Sullivan Machinery Company, 1902 to 1911. This tall brick building with sawtooth roof was used for parts of mining and quarrying equipment that had to be hand-forged, such as tool steel cutters. The parts were transported from the forge through a tunnel under Main Street to one of the erecting areas in the machine shops across the street. The original building was constructed in 1902, with additions in 1907 and 1911. It also housed a chemical laboratory and a heat treatment plant. First Baptist Church, 1833 to 1834. A Baptist society had formed in Claremont as early as 1785 and was one of three sects who built a round church on Broad Street in 1815. This Greek Revival church underwent extensive remodeling in 1872 and again in the 1960s. Industrialists' Mansions, 1835 to 1836. Three surviving Greek Revival mansions of an original group of four were built for Claremont industrialists Henry Russell, Ormond Dutton, Simeon Ide, and Charles L. Putnam during the boom known as Speculation Times in Claremont. The buildings were identical in the Federal Central Hallway style, with Doric porticos on gable ends. Now owned by St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, the mansions form an educational, residential complex. St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, 1870. Erected in 1870, this church replaced the original St. Mary's Church in West Claremont, circa 1823, believed to be New Hampshire's first. This Victorian Gothic building has undergone numerous additions and remodeling. Industrialist's Home, 1836. Similar to but smaller than the mansions on the south of Central Street, this Greek Revival house was probably built for another local entrepreneur during the 1830s speculation boom period. This house is owned by the St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church. Main Street, Tontine House, 1832 to 1833. This two-family stone house was built for worker housing by the Claremont Manufacturing Company at the same time as the factory of similar construction material. The factory later burned. 19th century cottages, 1890. A group of 6 wood-framed cottages probably built speculatively as worker housing between 1890 and 1900. Tontine Building, 1833 to 1834. Built by some of the Claremont Manufacturing Company investors, this brick federal commercial block was another product of the 1830s boom. The building probably initially housed 4 businesses. Parmalee Building, Claremont Bookstore Building, 1835. Another 1830s boom building, again erected by Claremont Manufacturing Company and Harold Parmalee. One building over 2 lots of land with a firewall. The distinctive stepped gable ends and the size of this building indicates the owner's expectations that the lower village section of the town would become Claremont's commercial center. Heritage Drive, Sugar River Grist Mill, 1855. This 2-story Greek Revival grist mill was constructed on a site used for grist and sawmills since Claremont's earliest days. Equipped with 8 run-of-stone, 4 flowering bolts, and at least 8 Tyler turbine water wheels, installed by inventor John Tyler of Claremont, the mill processed meal and flour from corn, wheat, rye, oats, and barley until World War II, when the Tyler water wheels were sold for scrap. The mill was later used as a grain store and was converted to housing for the elderly in the early 1980s. An adjacent sawmill built in 1855 and active until 1918 was razed during the housing conversion. Warehouse number 34, Sullivan Machinery, 1912. This tall brick structure was primarily used as a warehouse for mining and quarrying machinery and parts, although some welding was done here in the 1930s. A trolley track ran inside the building to facilitate loading. The building was sold to a local mattress manufacturer for warehousing in 1967 and was sold again in the early 1980s for conversion to housing for the elderly. Power Plant, Sullivan Machinery Company, 1919 to 1927. From this point on Heritage Drive, the power plant can be seen on the north side of the Sugar River. The plant is a complex of 3 buildings comprising a boiler house, 1919, containing 3 Wicks boilers, a 1-story brick engine and compressor room, 1919, housing a coreless compressor made by Sullivan, and a 1-story brick fire pump house, 1927, containing a number 125 Fairbanks Morse fire pump. The power plant supplied electricity to the Sullivan buildings on both sides of the river until 1978, when the last operations were moved to the River Road site. Rubber Mill, Maynard and Washburn, 1896. This 2-story brick building was constructed on the site of Claremont Manufacturing Company's stone factory by Maynard and Washburn, a Claremont shoe company. The building was used for manufacture of tennis shoes until 1913, when it was purchased by Sullivan for the manufacture of chain-driven coil cutters. Sullivan's successor, Joy Manufacturing Company, used the mill as its experimental building. Machine and Erecting Shop, Sullivan Machinery Company, 1905 to 1919. This brick building is composed of 2 shops built in a series of constructions from 1905 to 1919, extending the complex to the riverbank. The machine shop was used by both Sullivan and Joy for manufacturing gear cuttings, tool cuttings with turret lathes, and diamond drills. Coal cutters, air compressors, and drilling rigs were assembled in the erecting shop. Main Street, Machine and Erecting Shop, Sullivan Machine Company, 1905, 1913, and 1919. This site was used as early as 1884 by Sullivan for pattern shop, roving can manufacturing, and a lumber house. A 4-story brick machine shop was built here in 1905, with 2 more of the same design added onto the west of the first in 1913, all designed by Arthur S. Coffin. This construction established a solid wall of Sullivan buildings extending about 2/10 of a mile along Main Street. The buildings were heavily damaged and partially destroyed by an intense fire in June 1979. One of the 1913 buildings, remodeled in 1919, and a portion of another were saved. Machine and Erecting Shop, Sullivan Machinery Company, 1888, 1892, 1903, and 1919. This large factory complex has been unused since it was heavily damaged by a second devastating fire in June 1981. It consisted of 5 principal buildings: a 4-story brick machine shop containing the oldest section of the factory, 1888, a 3-story brick machine shop wing, 1892, a 3-story erecting and machine shop, 1900, which housed a large traveling crane, a 7-story brick warehouse, 1900, and a 1-story brick boiler and engine house, 1900 to 1903. Hira Beckwith of Claremont was the architect for the original buildings. Mill Road, Foundry, Sullivan Machine Company, 1905 to 1908. This massive foundry complex, located on the north side of the Sugar River, is visible from the curve of Mill Road. The complex comprised 8 principal buildings: a 3-story brick pattern shop with sawtooth roof, a 6-story brick pattern storage building, a 1-story brick casting and cleaning room, Foundry Number 1, a 1-story brick building with 2 additions, Foundry Number 2, a tall 1-story brick building with sawtooth roof, a 2-story brass foundry, and a 3-story brick office and storage building. The land is owned by the city and hosts a newly constructed visitor center, offices of economic development and planning. Weave Shed, Monadnock Mills Company, 1909. This tall 2-story brick building was built originally to house 65 jacquard looms for weaving bedspreads. It has a stone foundation, brick arched windows, and cast stone lintels. A stone raceway runs under the building from east to west. Since 1946, the building has been used by Claremont Woven Label Company, which produces about 300,000 woven labels a day on Fletcher jacquard looms. Claremont Gas Light Company, Monadnock Mills Company, 1859 to 1910, and Sunapee Mill, Storehouse Number 3, Sunapee Mill Company, 1856. The Claremont Gas Light Company, visible on the north side of the river from Mill Road, was chartered by Monadnock in 1854, and by 1859 was providing gas lights for the Monadnock Mills and some stores and houses in the village. In 1888, Monadnock purchased all outstanding stock in the company and expanded its services steadily through 1924. The company came under the general ownership of Central Vermont Public Service in 1950. Visible are the 1910 building and the foundation for the 1859 gas holder. Mill Number 6, Monadnock Mills Company, 1915. This 6-story mill was built on the site of a boiler house constructed in 1853 to supply heat to the mills. It is connected at all 6 floors to the north facade of Mill Number 2. The mill housed machinery for preparing warp beams for weaving cotton textile. Water Street, Mill Number 3, Monadnock Mills Company, 1892. Originally built as a 4-story brick weaving mill in 1892, this building has a 5th story added about 1920. The upper 4 floors were used for weaving jacquard bedspreads, and the bottom floor for weaving plain cotton goods. The main stair tower on the south facade has a prominent corbelled brick cornice and half-round arched window on the 4th floor. Other architectural features are arched brick windows with granite sills. In 1916, this building became the first in the complex to be run by electricity. Weave Shed, Cotton Waste House, Monadnock Mills Company, 1876. This one-story building was used for weaving jacquard bedspreads. The basement was used to store cotton waste. The building had decorative cornices, brick arches over windows, and granite stills. The pitch roof was replaced with a flat roof after a fire in 1899. The building was later used for wholesale woolen storage. Mill Number 2, Monadnock Mills Company, 1853. This 5-story brick mill has a small decorative cornice, raked eaves, granite corner blocks, lintel and sills, iron tie rods, and a central stair tower that was enlarged in 1906. The first 3 floors were used for spinning and warping. The building was later used for furniture sales and a bicycle shop. Wheel and Pump House, Monadnock Mills Company, 1874. This 2-story building was originally used as a bleach house until 1876, when a 4-foot Wetmore turbine was installed and the building became the central power site for the entire mill complex. A 250 horsepower steam engine was installed in 1866, followed by a 500 horsepower engine in 1881. These synchronized with the turbines and supplemented them at times of low water. This operation supplied power to a 6-foot main shaft which ran 575 feet within the complex and drove all the shafting. Mill Number 1, Monadnock Mills Company, 1836 to 1839. The first building in the complex, Mill Number 1, was built speculatively by a group of local investors who sold it to Parker, Wilder, and Parker of Boston in 1843. The Boston group equipped the building and began manufacturing cotton, ticking, sheeting, and drilling in 1844, incorporating as the Monadnock Mills Company in 1846. The building was used for most stages of cotton fabric production. In 1980, unused for many years and in a state of severe disrepair, the building was purchased by the state of New Hampshire, rehabilitated, and reopened as a state office building in 1983. Overseer's House, Monadnock Mills Company, 1840. Built as one of a pair of identical houses for mill overseers, this 2-story building has housed 2 families for most of its life. It contains brick kitchen units on the east and west ends. Its twin was raised in 1977 for parking space, but this building was privately restored. Cloth Room Building, Old Bleach House, Monadnock Mills Company, 1875. This building was originally built as a bleach house with a cloth room, picker house, and attached cotton waste house. It has a concrete foundation, iron tie rods, heavy corbelled cornice with decorative string course, and granite sills and lintels. After 1902, the building became known as the Cloth Room Building and was used for trimming, singeing, and dyeing quilts. It is presently used for furniture and household storage. Boarding House, Storehouse Number 5, Monadnock Mills Company, 1836 to 1839. Erected speculatively along with Mill Number 1 between 1836 and 1839, this building was put into use in 1844 as a house for unmarried workers. The building has a stone foundation, brick cornice and string course, raked eaves, flat brick arched windows, and original wooden sills. A storehouse and blacksmith shop was added in 1902 and 1904, and by 1911 the building housed a machine shop and a carpenter's shop where wooden veneer quilt shipping boxes were made. Adjacent to this boarding house was Tenement House, built on Main Street in 1873, and moved to this site in 1892 to make way for construction of Mill Number 3. The 3-story wood-frame tenement building was raised in 1983 to facilitate reuse of other buildings in the complex. Bleach House, Monadnock Mills Company, 1902. The bleach house was built on a site previously occupied by a repair shop and a schoolhouse, and was used for finishing cotton goods produced in the mills. Its architectural features include a stone and granite foundation, heavy corbelled cornice, and brick-arched windows. The building housed an upholstery business until 1990. Changes continue in Claremont's historic mill district. Future plans include new uses for the sturdy brick and wood structures that you have seen here. They will be home to light manufacturing, retail businesses, and offices, including the headquarters of the Red River Computer Corporation. Light and airy residential condominiums, a riverfront park with recreation access, and spectacular views from a footbridge spanning the Sugar River. New downtown parking and the latest version of the famous Common Man restaurant, which will also offer waterfront view lodging. Thank you for spending time with us, honoring the past while looking towards the future of Claremont, New Hampshire. For more information about this program, contact the Greater Claremont Chamber of Commerce at 603-543-1296.